The galaxy watched with cold eyes as the enemy celebrated what they believed was their final triumph. Great banners of alien warlords hung across captured human colonies, and their fleets patrolled the skies like hunters who had already eaten their prey. They called it the end of humanity, the closing of a chapter that had lasted too long. Across the stars, their leaders declared victory. The last human warships had fallen silent, broken hulks drifting in orbit like forgotten ghosts. Earth, once a planet full of fire and life, now burned under their shadow. Cities that had touched the clouds were reduced to broken towers. Oceans glowed red from the fires that rained down from space. The enemy believed they had won completely, and for a time, it looked true. Humanity's fleets were gone, its armies scattered, and its proud worlds reduced to rubble. In the ruins, survivors whispered words no one ever wanted to speak: "It's over." Yet in the silence after defeat, something strange began to grow. The enemy did not notice it, or perhaps they ignored it, blinded by their own pride. But in the ashes of fallen cities, deep under collapsed buildings and forgotten tunnels, eyes still burned with defiance. Men, women, and children who had lost everything still carried a spark of something the enemy could not crush. It was not weapons, nor ships, nor armies. It was the simple will to stand again. Humanity had fallen, yes, but humanity was not finished. The silence that hung over Earth and its colonies was not only despair. It was the silence of breath being held, of something waiting to move. The survivors hid their movements well. To the enemy's scouts, Earth looked like a graveyard. But beneath the ruins, whispers passed through secret channels. Small bands of fighters carried hidden supplies through shattered streets. Scientists who had once worked in shining laboratories now worked in dark basements, using broken parts and stolen alien technology to build something new. Every time the enemy celebrated, every time they raised their voices in victory, humanity listened quietly, waiting for their moment. Rumors began to spread in the underground. A word, soft at first, spoken only in fear, then in hope, the answer. No one knew what the answer truly was. Some said it was a new weapon, one that could burn through even the strongest alien ships. Others claimed it was not a weapon at all, but a strategy, a way of fighting that would turn the war upside down. Whatever it was, the word gave strength to those still alive. Mothers told it to their children as a promise. Soldiers whispered it before they slept. And in the shadows, leaders of the resistance spoke of it as if it were destiny. The enemy could not hear these whispers. They looked at the ruined worlds and saw only silence. They mistook silence for defeat. They did not understand that silence can also mean waiting. Waiting for the right time, the right spark, the right moment to strike back. The alien leaders boasted to each other about the end of humanity. They declared that no species could rise again after such destruction. They told their people that Earth was nothing more than a burned rock. Yet when they looked into the eyes of captured humans, something unsettled them. There was no begging, no broken spirit, no surrender. The eyes of humanity were wounded, yes, but behind the pain, there was something the enemy could not name. It was not hope, not yet. It was patience. In their arrogance, the enemy ignored this. They held parades on human soil, laughing at the ruins beneath their feet. They placed their flags on shattered towers, not knowing that below those same towers, in the tunnels, humanity was listening, planning, and waiting. What the galaxy did not yet see was that the story was not over. The enemy thought they had won, but they had mistaken the quiet for the end. Humanity had been pushed into the shadows, but from the shadows, they would rise. And when they did, the galaxy itself would tremble. Beneath the ruined worlds, where the enemy's eyes did not reach, humanity continued to move like shadows in the dark. The invaders believed the war was finished, but in the broken tunnels of fallen cities, the spark of defiance grew brighter with every passing day. Survivors became messengers, carrying food, stolen parts, and words of hope through the silence of destruction. In places where light could not reach, engineers and scientists worked by the glow of small lamps, shaping pieces of scrap into tools, combining broken human machines with fragments of alien technology. Soldiers who once commanded fleets now trained small groups in secret, teaching them not how to fight with strength, but how to fight with patience and cunning. They called it survival, but in truth, it was preparation. And always, the whispers continued, the answer. The enemy had no understanding of what moved beneath their feet. They saw the surface of Earth as quiet and empty, a graveyard of a defeated species. They looked upon burned colonies and declared that nothing lived there but ghosts. Their arrogance made them blind, for they did not see the tunnels alive with activity, or the quiet messages carried by radio signals so faint they were mistaken for static. They did not see the children learning in hidden rooms, repeating stories of what humanity once was and what it would be again. To the aliens, these survivors were too weak to matter. To humanity, they were the seed of something greater. In the dark, plans formed that the enemy could not imagine. A network of resistance stretched from Earth to the farthest broken colony. A signal passed between them, not words of surrender, but promises of revenge. Scientists in the ashes of destroyed universities studied the alien weapons left behind, searching for weaknesses. They discovered things the enemy had not intended to reveal. Their shields were powerful, but not perfect. Their ships were vast, but not invincible. Humans began to see patterns, flaws, and cracks in the armor of their conquerors. Small victories were taken in silence, an enemy patrol vanishing in the night, a supply ship stolen, an outpost left burning without explanation. The aliens called them accidents, but the survivors knew better. Among the enemy, pride began to grow dangerous. Their leaders laughed at the thought of rebellion. They told their people that humanity was broken forever. But whispers of unease spread among their lower ranks. Soldiers spoke quietly of resistance fighters who appeared and vanished like smoke. Pilots spoke of human eyes that glowed with something unbroken, even when their bodies were chained. And in the stillness of captured cities, some alien officers admitted what others refused to say, that the silence of humanity was not the silence of death. It was the silence before a storm. Still, the enemy pushed their parades across ruined streets. They planted their banners and built statues of victory. They mocked humanity as they feasted in their stolen halls. Yet every celebration hid a small shadow, for even as they drank and laughed, there were places in the galaxy where human hands were building something greater. The survivors called it the answer, but none spoke openly of what it meant. Was it a weapon? Was it a fleet? Was it an idea? Only the leaders of the hidden network truly knew. But even those who did not understand still believed in it, because belief itself became a weapon. It gave strength to the weak, courage to the broken, and silence to those who might have cried out in despair. Across the galaxy, the enemy spies began to report strange things. Supplies missing, communications cut, small fleets vanishing into space without a trace. Each time, the alien commanders dismissed it as chance, as the chaos left after war. But one among them spoke in fear. What if this is not chance? What if this is the humans? His words were ignored, drowned by the laughter of his peers. But his fear was real, and it was not without reason. For in the hidden corners of the galaxy, where no alien dared to look, humanity's survivors prepared for more than survival. They prepared for return. In workshops hidden beneath oceans and in caves beneath mountains, machines began to awaken. Ships that had been silent stirred as engineers connected wires and tested engines. Weapons, built from a mix of alien design and human imagination, were tested in silence. Strategies were written not to fight openly, but to strike where the enemy least expected, to turn their own pride against them. Humanity was small now, scattered and wounded, but in the dark, it was becoming something stronger. The word spread further. The answer was coming. To the enemy, it was nothing but a whisper, a rumor. But to humanity, it was the sound of destiny. And though the galaxy did not yet know it, the day would come when that whisper would rise into a voice that could not be silenced. The silence of the defeated would end. The quiet world beneath the enemy's boots would roar to life again. And when it did, the galaxy would remember that humanity was not broken. Humanity was waiting. The alien leaders stood high above their conquered worlds, looking down with eyes full of pride. To them, humanity was finished, nothing more than a memory. They believed they had broken not only the armies but also the spirit of the species. On every captured planet, they built monuments to their own victory, tall and shining, as if to erase the ruins of human cities beneath. They paraded their soldiers across broken streets, forcing the surviving humans to watch and bow. They mocked the faces that stared back at them, thinking those eyes were empty. Yet those eyes were not empty. They were waiting. But the aliens did not see it. Their arrogance made them blind. In their war councils, the commanders spoke with laughter. Humans are weak, they declared. They fought with fire, but now they are ash. They told themselves that the galaxy no longer needed to fear the children of Earth. They celebrated too loudly, too carelessly, never noticing the quiet shadows moving behind them. They believed strength was measured only in numbers, in fleets, in the power of weapons. They did not understand the dangerous strength of patience. Every victory parade was a show not of confidence but of vanity. Their great ships floated above ruined worlds like golden crowns. They filled the skies with banners, sending messages across the galaxy that the war was over. They did not see how hollow their words sounded, not even to their own people. Some of their soldiers felt a different truth. When they looked at captured humans, chained and silent, they did not see fear. They saw something colder. They saw eyes that refused to break. And though those soldiers followed orders, deep inside they felt unease. They asked themselves, why did humans not cry out for mercy? Why did they not beg? Why, even in defeat, did they still stare with defiance? Among the alien leaders, pride grew so vast it turned into blindness. Reports of missing supplies, sabotaged patrols, and stolen technology were ignored. Accidents, they called them. Chaos left after battle. They told themselves that humans were too broken to resist. If a patrol vanished in the night, it was blamed on pirates. If a warehouse burned, it was blamed on mistakes. They never accepted the truth, that humans were moving again, even while chained. The arrogance reached across the stars. On alien homeworlds, they held festivals to mark the end of the human threat. Songs of triumph filled their cities. Families cheered as their soldiers marched through streets, waving banners stolen from Earth as trophies. Children of the enemy were taught that humans had been weak and foolish, that their rise had been nothing more than a mistake in history. And yet, in whispers among lower ranks, doubts began to spread. Soldiers told each other of raids that left no trace, of ambushes in places thought secure, of systems that failed without reason. And always, the same rumor returned, it was the humans. Still, the leaders laughed. They reminded their people of the battles already won. They pointed to the ruins of Earth and said, look, they are finished. They spread propaganda across the galaxy, declaring themselves the true rulers of the stars. They told the galaxy that no one could ever rise against them. But even as their words echoed, the silence of humanity spoke louder. On Earth, the alien commanders looked down from their towers at the ruins of human cities. They believed the silence below was fear. They did not realize it was the silence of preparation. When they walked through the streets, guarded by soldiers, they mocked the humans who stood aside. See how they bow, they said. But the humans were not bowing out of surrender. They bowed to hide their eyes, because in their eyes burned a fire that could not yet be revealed. And so the enemy grew comfortable. Their fleets spread thinner, patrolling more worlds, showing less caution. They believed resistance was impossible, that control was permanent. Their commanders grew lazy, their soldiers careless. And in this comfort, the cracks in their empire began to widen. What they could not see was that every act of pride gave humanity more time, more space, more opportunity. While they feasted, humanity planned. While they mocked, humanity built. While they slept, humanity waited. The galaxy believed the enemy's story. Other species watched from afar and saw only the surface, ruined human worlds, silence from Earth, banners of conquest across the stars. They too began to think humanity was finished. They too believed the enemy's lies. But a few watched closer. A few wondered why the humans were so quiet, why they did not cry out in defeat. And those few began to whisper that perhaps the enemy was wrong. But the enemy would not listen. They drowned themselves in pride, blind to the danger beneath their feet. They believed the silence of humanity meant death, but it meant something else entirely. It meant waiting for the right time. It meant holding back the storm until the sky was ready to break. The enemy thought they had crushed humanity forever. They did not realize they had only given humanity reason to rise again. And in the shadows of ruined worlds, far away from alien eyes, that rise had already begun. Far across the stars, in the dark silence that had fallen after humanity's defeat, something stirred. The enemy believed the galaxy was theirs. They believed the human voice had been silenced forever. But one night, across forgotten channels, a signal broke the quiet. It was faint at first, just a flicker of static among the endless noise of space. Enemy operators dismissed it as interference, a meaningless echo in the void. But to those who listened closely, to those who still remembered what the human voice sounded like, it was not noise. It was a whisper. And that whisper carried across hidden networks, through tunnels, across broken colonies, into the ears of those who had not surrendered. The signal was short, only a few words, spoken in a voice that was calm but unshaken. "We are not finished." That was all. No commands, no demands, no long speeches. Just those 4 words. But across the galaxy, they struck like fire. Survivors who had thought they were alone sat upright in the dark, tears running down their faces. Soldiers who had hidden their weapons gripped them again with shaking hands. Children who had grown up in ruins whispered the words to each other as though they were magic. In bunkers under ruined cities, in ships drifting silent in forgotten asteroid fields, in colonies abandoned by all hope, the same words repeated over and over. "We are not finished." The enemy noticed the signal too, though they pretended not to at first. Their commanders scoffed, calling it a trick, the final scream of a dying species. But in private, their analysts studied the broadcast carefully. It had not come from one place. It had come from many. Across different colonies, across systems thought lifeless, the signal echoed. Someone, somewhere, had awakened a network that was never truly destroyed. Someone had given humanity back its voice. The enemy tried to silence it. They jammed channels, hunted down transmitters, destroyed outposts where they believed the message had been sent. Yet the words continued to spread. Every time they shut it down in one place, it appeared in another. It was as though the galaxy itself had chosen to carry the human voice. Civilians on alien worlds whispered it in secret, passing the words like forbidden fire. Even some alien soldiers, uneasy in their victory, repeated the phrase quietly when no one listened. For they too felt the weight of the silence break, and they too wondered what it meant. And then something even stranger began to happen. Human ships long thought destroyed suddenly appeared in deep space. Not great fleets, not armadas, but single vessels, scarred, battered, and alive. Engines roared where silence had reigned. Ships that had drifted dead for years powered up, answering the call. Colonists who had hidden for generations lit their beacons and sent their coordinates, no longer afraid. The signal had awakened more than voices. It had awakened movement. Across the ruins of Earth itself, survivors came out of the tunnels where they had lived like shadows. They lit fires where the enemy could see them. They painted the words on broken walls, "We are not finished." The enemy could not ignore it any longer. Their commanders called emergency meetings, demanding answers. How could a dead species speak again? How could a broken people resist their chains? They ordered their fleets to tighten control, to increase patrols, to strike harder at any sign of rebellion. Yet the more they struck, the stronger the signal grew. For with every human they tried to silence, 10 more whispered the words. With every transmitter they destroyed, another one lit up in a place they had not expected. Humanity was no longer silent. Humanity was speaking again, and the galaxy was listening. To the survivors, the signal was more than a message. It was proof. Proof that humanity was alive, proof that they were not alone, proof that the enemy's victory had been nothing but an illusion. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, where hope had been nothing more than a memory, people began to rise. Farmers who had hidden in caves took up stolen weapons. Scientists who had been too afraid to work uncovered their old notes. Soldiers who had once buried their uniforms now put them on again. The signal gave them purpose, gave them unity. It was not a command, it was a call. A call to remember who they were, and to remember that the story was not yet over. The galaxy itself seemed to shift. Species who had watched in silence, believing humanity destroyed, now spoke quietly among themselves. Some were afraid, for they had seen what humans could do when cornered. Others felt admiration, for they had never seen such defiance survive such defeat. But all of them listened. For the first time since the war ended, the galaxy remembered the name of Earth. And beneath the pride of their leaders, the enemy's soldiers began to feel something they had not felt in a long time: fear. Fear of the silence breaking. Fear of the humans returning. Fear that what they had believed was over was only the beginning. The message was too simple to erase. It did not carry threats, did not boast of weapons or armies. It only carried truth. Humanity was not finished. And soon, the enemy would learn what that truly meant. The galaxy trembled when the whispers of defiance turned into action. The enemy had grown used to silence, used to broken worlds and conquered people, but now the silence cracked like glass. From the shadows of forgotten colonies, from tunnels beneath ruined cities, from ships thought dead and drifting, humanity rose with something new. It was not a vast fleet. It was not an overwhelming force. It was something the enemy did not understand, cleverness mixed with desperation, technology fused with imagination, and courage sharpened into a weapon. Humanity had built the answer. The first signs came quietly. A patrol ship disappeared near the edges of a ruined colony. The enemy called it an accident. Then another vanished, swallowed in the dark. And then another. At first, the commanders dismissed it, but soon the losses could not be ignored. Entire squadrons were gone, their last transmissions filled with confusion, describing ambushes that made no sense. Enemy ships reported being struck by weapons they had never seen before, blades of light that slipped through their shields, explosives that turned their own systems against them, traps hidden in empty space. It was not brute force that destroyed them. It was something worse. It was human ingenuity. In hidden workshops across the stars, scientists had taken alien technology and broken it apart, studying its secrets with hungry eyes. What the enemy built to be strong, humans twisted into weaknesses. They created weapons smaller but sharper, engines faster but quieter. They built devices that confused enemy sensors, turning empty space into illusions of fleets. They crafted traps out of wreckage, luring warships into fields of death. Every piece of stolen scrap, every fragment of alien metal became part of something the enemy could not predict. The answer was not one weapon. It was every weapon, shaped by human hands into something new. When the attacks spread, panic rippled through the enemy ranks. They had believed the humans finished, but now they were being hunted in places they thought secure. Supply lines vanished, star bases exploded from within, fleets turned against themselves by sabotage. No longer was humanity on the defensive. They had become the hunters. Small groups of fighters struck like lightning and disappeared before the enemy could respond. One moment there was silence, the next there was fire, and then nothing but wreckage left behind. The enemy called them ghosts. To humanity, they were freedom. And as the battles grew, so too did the legend. Across colonies, survivors repeated the stories of human victories. A single ship destroying a fleet. A handful of soldiers toppling an outpost. Entire cities rising in revolt when the enemy least expected. Hope spread like fire through dry grass. The people who had once whispered in fear now shouted the signal with pride, "We are not finished." The galaxy heard it too, and what had once been disbelief turned into awe. Other species who had stayed silent began to watch carefully, wondering if perhaps the humans could succeed where they themselves had failed. The enemy leaders raged. They ordered their fleets to crush the resistance, to burn every world suspected of helping humans. They struck hard, but their blows landed on shadows. The humans were no longer where the enemy expected them to be. They moved like smoke, impossible to hold, impossible to destroy. The more the enemy fought, the more they revealed their own weakness. Their vast fleets were strong in open war, but useless against an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. They had never faced a people who turned defeat into a weapon. And then came the moment that could not be hidden. Over a captured colony deep in alien space, a fleet of enemy warships gathered to celebrate their control. In the skies above, their commanders gave speeches of victory. But as their voices filled the air, the sky itself broke apart. A human fleet, born from the wreckage of old ships and the genius of desperate builders, appeared out of the void. Their engines burned brighter than fire. Their weapons struck with precision. The enemy's shields failed against weapons designed to pierce them. Their mighty warships crumbled under the weight of traps they had never imagined. And before the eyes of the galaxy, the impossible happened. The enemy fled. News spread faster than light. Humanity had returned not as broken survivors, but as warriors who had turned loss into strength. The story of the answer was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. Every strike, every ambush, every victory shook the galaxy's belief in alien dominance. The enemy, once feared across the stars, now tasted fear themselves. For the first time, they wondered if their empire could fall. And humanity, once silenced, once broken, once buried in ash, now rose with voices louder than ever before. The answer was here, and the galaxy would never forget the sound of it. Across the galaxy, the shock of humanity's return spread like a storm. The enemy who once paraded their banners on ruined human worlds now pulled those banners down in fear, for they could no longer claim victory. The people they thought broken had risen from the ashes, carrying not just weapons, but a will that could not be crushed. The answer had been unleashed, and now the galaxy whispered a truth the enemy had tried to bury. Humanity was alive, and humanity was fighting back. On Earth, the scarred planet at the center of it all, the ruins glowed with a new kind of fire. Survivors who had hidden in tunnels for years emerged into the open. They no longer whispered, they shouted. Across collapsed cities, words were painted on the walls, "We are not finished." Fires were lit on the hills, signals that could be seen from orbit. The people who had once walked like ghosts now stood tall, watching the skies with pride, knowing that somewhere above, their brothers and sisters were striking blows that shook the enemy to their core. The enemy tried one last time to prove their dominance. They gathered a massive fleet, larger than anything humanity had faced before. Ships blackened the skies, engines roared like thunder, and their commanders declared, "This is the end of the humans once and for all." They wanted to crush the rebellion in a single overwhelming strike, to bury the spark of resistance before it became a fire too great to control. But they had already waited too long. Humanity had grown too strong in the shadows. When the enemy fleet arrived, expecting to find scattered survivors, they instead found something they had never faced before, a united humanity. Not united by governments or empires, but united by survival, by anger, and by hope. Ships of every size, some patched together from wrecks, others built with alien technology twisted into new forms, stood ready. Their numbers were not equal to the enemy's, but their spirit was greater than any weapon. And as the two fleets faced each other in the cold silence of space, humanity sent a final message across every channel, across every world, to friend and foe alike: "We are humanity. We answer the call." The battle that followed was not like the wars of the past. Humanity did not fight with strength alone. They fought with intelligence, with creativity, with an unshakable will to survive. Where the enemy moved in straight lines, humans twisted the battlefield into chaos. Where the enemy depended on heavy weapons, humans used traps, diversions, and precision strikes. Every trick, every lesson from centuries of struggle on Earth, every ounce of defiance was unleashed. The sky lit with fire, ships burned, and the enemy realized too late that their pride had blinded them. Humanity was not the same species they had once conquered. Humanity had become something greater. When the dust cleared, the galaxy held its breath. The enemy fleet, once thought unstoppable, was in ruins. Ships fled in every direction, commanders silent, soldiers broken. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they had been defeated not by a greater empire, but by the very species they had believed destroyed. Humanity stood scarred, blooded, but unbroken. Their ships drifted in the silence of victory, engines glowing faintly against the dark, survivors cheering even as their wounds burned. News spread across the stars faster than light. On distant colonies where people had given up hope, cheers rose. On alien worlds where fear of the enemy had silenced resistance, whispers grew louder. The galaxy began to see the truth, that the conquerors could be defeated, that their power was not endless, and that humanity had shown the way. Other species who had stayed silent now looked to Earth, no longer as a broken world, but as a symbol of defiance. On Earth itself, the survivors wept openly for the first time, not from sorrow, but from joy. They had lost much, their cities burned, their families scattered, their world scarred forever, but they had not lost themselves. The enemy had tried to erase their voice, but now their voice echoed louder than it ever had before. Humanity was not only alive. Humanity had returned. And as the galaxy listened, a new feeling spread, hope. Not just for Earth, but for every world that had ever suffered under the weight of conquest. The story of humanity was no longer a tragedy. It was a promise. A promise that even when the fire seems gone, even when silence covers the stars, even when defeat looks certain, there can still be an answer. The enemy retreated, broken and humiliated, but the war was not finished. There were still battles to fight, still worlds to free, still scars to heal. Yet for the first time, humanity looked to the future not with despair, but with strength. They had proven something the galaxy would never forget: that no matter how deep the shadow, the human spirit could not be crushed. And so the story closed not with silence, but with a roar. A roar that carried across the stars, into every dark corner, into every frightened heart, declaring one truth that no enemy could erase: humanity had answered the call.